Well, here we are on a Friday morning, and it's a beautiful day outside. And Pat, as I was saying to you, there's two ways you can look at global warming. Which would you favour? Would you favour the short term or the long term?
Yeah, well, put it as we won't be around for the long term, but the short term is there's something, Jude, as you say. It's a beautiful morning here. Yesterday, I went out for a drive, and I noticed in the car it was 17 degrees. Now, 17 degrees at the end of October in the north, the further northest part of this island is something else, Jude. I don't ever remember 17 degrees at the end of October.
Well, this is a warned us, wet and windy is what they
Yeah.
said winters would be like, and by God, they're right.
Uh,
And I keep reading these things in the paper too that say it's too late. It's too late now.
uh,
They've passed the point of no
Yeah, I
return.
was watching Question Time on BBC last night, and I can't remember. There was some person who on said the science is now that it is too late.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh
uh,
well, no, I'll up here, as you
uh,
say. Okay, to matters closer to home, not less global than that anyway. And that is, lo and behold, we're going to have another election here in the occupied territories. What do you think
yeah.
of that? Will this make a big difference? Is this a good
Ju-
move? Are
I
we
don't know what's
happy?
Judah. Somebody said yesterday. I don't even. I'm on a bad roll so far, but they said this sounded like a wake for power sharing in the north, and I think it is because you know, basically, Jude. I think, and I'm not saying in a partisan way, Sinn Féin could have argued legitimately why the Stormont regime was brought down the last time. 650 million missing, no accountability. They didn't bring down Stormont deliberately. They asked Arlene Foster to step aside for a little while to be in, there could be investigation, etc., etc., etc. Now, you might argue, that they didn't need whatever happened subsequently, but the DUP played a big role in this. This one is totally, even tomorrow morning, Jude, the Northern Ireland Assembly will never ever be able to sort out between London and Brussels. No matter what election happens, the Michelle O'Neill or Jeffrey Donaldson will not be able to negotiate something to do with the protocol. So the protocol is above their pay grade. So why Northern Ireland Assembly? It should be up to the London and Brussels to sort this out, not Belfast.
But the way I interpret it is that the Jeffrey and company are using this as a lever.
Of
They're
course it is.
saying
Yeah,
to the UK, look, we're not going to go back into government. You're going to have this protocol. You're going to have this border problem. You better sort it. So they're using that against their own government, to which they're enormously loyal.
yeah.
A sort of a threat to the UK to sort it. See, I wonder. Like I said, I was making notes and I said that the DUP are a prisoner to their previous misplaced trust.
Yeah,
And they have been shown to be taken for suckers by the Tories several times. So I
yeah.
guess they realise it's very important that they're not shown to be weaklings in this case.
Mm.
But then, if you think about the other side of it, the UK is sort of a prisoner of its past as well,
Yeah,
but it doesn't seem to bother it. It signed the protocol into law, and now it's
yeah.
busy concocting a law that will smash the protocol. So it says, anyway.
Yeah,
Does that make sense to you?
yeah, absolutely. This is the legacy of Boris Johnson's gung ho, no rules apply to me type approach. Everything was just short term. Let me get elected, let me get into power, and then we'll worry about the consequences after.
Yeah,
This,
yeah.
that sort of you know pirate type of politics that he went for.
Good word,
Uh,
pirate.
but it really is we will do anything, we'll smash and grab, we'll do anything. And, but hey, the other side of this, the other people are not playing by the same rules. Dude, he basically, remember they said there would be a breaking of international law in a specifically whatever way.
Limited way,
You know,
yeah.
that was like being a wee bit pregnant. You signed an agreement and now you're breaking it. Now, here's the other thing, Jude, as you were talking about. Apparently, it will, no matter what happens, it'll be June next year. Even if
Yes.
the protocol bill goes through, it will be June next year because it's gone to the Lords. If they throw it back, it'll have to go through some other process, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they said, even, this, how long it could take. So, in the meanwhile, there is no Stormont sitting. Therefore, all these things like health, welfare, heating or eating, all the major issues that are getting addressed on mainland Britain are not getting addressed in Northern Ireland.
Well,
And then well, there's going to be some, like there'll be civil service and servants, and all, but the big long-term decisions won't be made. Like, will any civil servant make a long-term decision on regard to?
No, that's for sure.
Not at all.
But
They'll do each week.
But
Sorry,
Pat, I was going to say, is there not a strand, like we were saying, that there's two possible reactions? At least I was thinking there'd be two possible reactions to this digging their heels in by the DUP and refusing to join the executive or form an executive. One is that unionists, and this is what we're told by the media, that they have struck a chord within unionism, that they are energized because of this stand of the DUP and that they're really rallying behind them. Now, I'm not sure if that's the case, but I gather there's been some pollings that would suggest that that was the case. I would have thought it might have been more likely that there'd be quite a few unionists who would make their way through this winter suffering like the rest of us, or like the rest of those people who haven't got enough to heat or eat, and that they would say, this is absurd, we're not going to put up with this, and that the DUP would suffer electorally. So which of the two seems more likely to you?
Well, I presume that there's the hard line. Some of them would eat grass. I was listening to.
Are they a minority now?
Well, here's the point. Doug Beattie came out yesterday and he said there's a lot of anger in this chamber, but he said there'll be a hell of a lot more anger outside when he says, So I take it, Jude. Let's get this clear. Jeffrey Donaldson is trying to play this, I presume, for the mainland again, for the audience over there, that this is about such and such trade and all the rest of it. Jim Allister really let the cat out of the bag when he said, no, it's not. It's all about the constitutional position, that this is really about the sort of border in the Irish Sea, we'll call it that, and so on. And, Jude, even tomorrow morning, if the protocol was delivering gold bars to every unionist, there are certain people that, Jim Allister, he's not interested in economic welfare for the people, not interested in whether Catholics and Protestants are now doing well, because as long as Brussels, rather than Westminster, is having some sort of a say in Northern Ireland, that's the bottom line of it all. Jude, and I always keep remembering the famous one. They said there was talk about putting the border on between North and South, that the technology. Why don't they use technology now between Britain and Northern Ireland?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that seems so blindingly obvious. I'm surprised that they brought that up. Yeah. I'm wondering, do you think many unionists will look at the thing having suffered and say, no, enough of this. This is ridiculous. Because I think the North is, I mean, they say the North's been treated differently than the rest of the UK, but we're treated differently in a whole range of ways.
Exactly. Up until, when did the Scottish Parliament come into being? Northern Ireland is off the mainland Britain. It's always been treated differently. Northern Ireland got a parliament in 1922. Yeah. Scotland didn't have one. Wales didn't have one. Northern Ireland was not at the convention. Northern Ireland was never mentioned at Westminster. That the place ruled itself. And so now to turn around and say, "Oh, wait a minute, we're being treated differently." During the foot and mouth, disease, or what the hell you want to call it, all the. Ireland was treated as one, and was treated, and by the way, with the full 100% consent of Northern Unionist politicians.
Yeah, didn't they at some stage refer to English cows and Irish cows?
Yeah,
or words to that effect,
at
least.
And I remember Hume telling me years ago that there was some sort of subsidy scheme, and he said, off the record, Paisley came to him and said, "John, we want to get treated the same as Southern Irish farmers." So like. And I said to Hume at the time, "Why didn't you go public on it?" He says, "Well," he says, "that would be sort of defeat the purpose." But the bottom line was, under the surface, there was quite a lot of unions looking for all Ireland treatment. By the way, they're looking for all Ireland treatment for tourism, for foreign direct investment, and all the rest of it. But it's what they're saying is, when anything that looks like it's affecting the constitutional position, even if it's to our benefit, we don't want it.
Yeah, well, I know when you mentioned that, in most sports, the great majority of sports, apart from soccer and something else, I think, are played on an All-Ireland basis.
Yeah.
Now, that is
the boxing team is All-Ireland, All-Ireland. Yeah, what do you call it? The rowing teams are nearly All-Ireland. What else? You can keep the rugby teams All-Ireland. I think the cricket teams All-Ireland. You can keep going.
What about, do you think that unionism will come back per, in the past, when they've stayed out for whatever reason out of the assembly, they come back to the table per, in a worse position than they left it. Do you think this is going to be the case in this instance?
Can I throw someone at you, which I thought was very odd? On Nolan's show on whatever night it was, Wednesday night, Nolan said that they had sent certain questions to the Northern Ireland office, and about one of them was about joint authority.
Yes.
And the thing was, he came back and said they hadn't really ruled it out. Now, last night they ruled it out, but maybe I am reading too much into this, but there's nearly a conspiracy theory part of my brain saying, were they sending a wee message to the unionists? Look, everything's up for grabs here. But no, last night, okay, they said no, it wasn't under consideration and so on. But why did they not rule it out on Wednesday night when it was put to them originally?
Well, I actually have another question prior to that. Why did Sinn Féin and why did Micheál Martin say that it would not be direct rule from London as in the past? Yeah. I actually think this is an example for Micheál Martin and maybe Sinn Féin too, of having your cake and eating it.
What do you mean?
I think you're saying that there was powers within the agreement, the Good Friday Agreement, that the South weren't using. Yeah. In terms of direct rule, or else you're saying that something exists that nobody has really been aware of, and they're now going to use it. I don't believe they have anything about a consultative role, Pat.
Aye, but Jude, I think the answer to that one is, as long as the Northern Ireland was functioning, they didn't have the role. But once it collapses, the role expands, because they were only supposed to be taken. Strand 3 was Strand 1 was internal. Strand 2 was what north south, and Strand 3 is east west between London and Dublin. Well, apparently, if the internal one that sort of collapses, the consultative role then becomes much wider.
I wonder does it, Pat? I wonder does it? I think the Brits themselves have said that they will be the people who are going to be governing Northern Ireland. And if the South has going to have a role, it's going to be a consultative role. In other words, they'll make the decision, and they say to the Irish, "What do you think?"
Let me stop you right up until right. When we were talking years ago, basically we're talking 2/3, 1/3. That was the breakdown of the population, right? On what earlier this year, for the first time ever, it was confirmed that the nationalist population is now bigger or larger than the Protestant population, in terms of Protestants and Catholics, for the first time ever. So here we're going to say the unionists are saying joint authority is not acceptable to them, and it's never going to happen. But they're saying to the larger population now, we're going to get our own way, because no role for your group, the nationalist Dublin ethos or axis, but ours are going to keep on. Well, can you imagine Mary Lou MacDonald or Michelle O'Neill or John Finucane and sort of saying, wait a minute, we're going back to be ruled by Tory with the connivance of unionism, and we're just going to sit there and take that?
Well, you see, but Pat, you must remember that based on the Good Friday Agreement, that's what they signed up to.
Yeah.
That is that if the executive wasn't working, direct rule from London.
Yeah, but old-fashioned direct rule, with Tory ministers flying in it, I think that there has to be one of the nationalist population is now the consent principle works both ways. That there should be some consent for the views of the nationalist people.
Aye, but nationalist people, but not as distinct from the Dublin government.
No, I don't think there's going to be joint authority. But I am working on the basis that Micheál Martin and others are aware of the fact that if this thing doesn't come back up, that there'll be an increased role for the Dublin government. Well, and consultative role. The bottom line is, if there's no internal setup working, the consultative role I think aggregates itself, because then Dublin can be consulted on more issues.
Well, I think that's a very positive way of looking at it, but I suspect that the British will suit themselves. The fact that matter is, you can look at them having a consultative role in a positive way and say, isn't it
Yeah.
great? Every time a decision is made, you look on the TV and there's an Irish government minister, maybe the Taoiseach standing there beside the Brit. That's wonderful. What a change, because the Unionists and Britain had always claimed this was an internal problem. And the fact that the Irish government are there, it shows that it's not that. So that's great. But in fact, in terms of decision making, it was the British who make the decisions, and the Dublin government or government ministers are really just wallpaper standing there.
That's true to an extent, but not always. That in the era of Tony Blair and Bertie Ahern, they were in lockstep, and there's no doubt about it. Because
but that was setting up the Good Friday Agreement, Pat.
It worked perfectly, because Blair never took a step without ensuring Bertie was on board, and that meant that the nationalist community was basically on board. If down the line the unions and Westminster wants to act unilaterally, and it's a battle a day with Irish government ministers, with the EU, with the media, with the nationalist population, go ahead. But I don't think that's a very bright way to go.
Okay, here, finally, we will leave this in a moment, but final question to you, Pat. Do you think that this is going to galvanise unionism to march behind the DUP and maybe even gain them extra seats?
No, I don't.
Or do you think it's the other way around?
No, Jude, Jude, the hardliners will obviously row in behind it. But I think there's a lot of people, the ordinary people who this year know. And by the way, Jude, the cost of living is a major issue. I think I told you the last day I was down in Dublin the last day, and went in and got basically a chicken sandwich, a cup of coffee, €12. The cost of living has gone up through the roof. And there were some, I saw yesterday too, people claiming that people with kids who can't get up, and this is in the north now. So, Jude, a lot of people are going to say, hey, the real issue for me is putting food on the table.
But will they translate that into how they vote?
Jude, there'll be some people so pissed off. The other side of the story, of course, Jude, what you haven't mentioned, I think a lot of nationals are getting totally and utterly pissed off with this sort of form of unionism, that that they're claiming everything's going against them. Jude, they're still calling the shots. And what about where's democracy if you voted Sinn Féin, if you voted for the SDLP? That you're not getting the health treatment, you're not getting a, what do you call her? Naomi Long said she was really angry yesterday at that press conference. She said, "I am ashamed of this place."
Yeah, I saw that. It was a pretty powerful reaction, I thought. But still face you with a question. Do you think Sinn Féin will do better as a result of this? Or do you think that the DUP will do better in this? Or are we saying there's going to be even Stevens? I find it very hard to believe it will be even Stevens.
Well, Jude, it's hard to say, because I think the DUP are playing the game that, we're not going back in. We want to know the 80,000 votes that went to the sort of the Jim Allister brigade and so on. I think they're aiming to get those people back, and then saying we're going to go back with a better mandate and sort of say it, and maybe as the top spot, they maybe regain. But having said that, Jude, the last time they played that game, it didn't work out all that well for them. And the other thing as well, Jude, remember the old alligator remark? That worked brilliantly for Sinn Féin, and they knew it from day one that it was a gift. I think it's a zero-sum game, and that's an old cliche. But Jude, I think a lot of nationals are so pissed off with it. Basically, the unions are playing a game that's all about semantics for them.
But one of the things, Pat, that's lurking in the background is this fear of loyalist violence. Now, the Loyalist Community Council, I think they're called, they have issued a threat saying there will be dire consequences if the protocol problem isn't solved. I heard Chris Donnelly on the radio this morning, and he was saying this is sort of outrageous. Why aren't the PSNI acting, allowing these people, the UVF or the UDA or whoever, to issue these threats against the population? And Nolan's response was, well, I wouldn't stand up in court. Somebody has threatened them with dire consequences. I mean, that would never convict anybody. But do you think that it's ridiculous? I mean, Chris Donnelly was saying, if the dissident group of the IRA had warned the same thing, they would have been held to pay.
Absolutely. Say tomorrow morning, if P. O'Neill said the provisional IRA are back in action, and we're issuing a statement, unless we get our own way, there will be dire consequences. I'll give you a guarantee all hell will break loose.
And yet we tolerate this. You don't see this ever, people saying, look, enough is enough. Go after these guys. You don't see that happening?
No, Jude, I find that, and Jude, I find it amazing that these statements, this community, so-called community, representing the UDA, the UVF, and loyalists, and they're almost like, it's almost as if they're leading unionism these days. They're making a statement. You notice Jeffrey Donaldson is not going towards the centre; he's going towards the right, towards the extreme. And they're calling the shots. Well, not literally so far, but it's like Jim Allister has really been making, and Jamie Bryson seem to reflect where unionism or loyalism is at, and the DUP are going towards that.
But wouldn't you think? I mean, we all know unionist people who would be horrified by being a very idea that they would be associated with the LCC. So. Will they not peel away from the DUP when they get to the election booth next time?
No, Jude, I remember people telling me, very moderate, decent unionist people, Protestant people, Paisley, the bigotry doesn't stand. See, when it came to election, Jesus, a hell of a lot of them must have voted for him because he topped the poll every time.
Yeah. Jeez, that's a bit disillusioning, really. Okay, I think we've given that a sufficient run. Let's move to another little matter, less important, of course, and that is the war in Ukraine. And Putin, I didn't see this rant you described that went on for hours, but I gathered he'd been doing some saber rattling, Putin, yesterday. Tell us a wee bit about it very briefly, Pat.
I sat and watched it, Jude. I don't know. I must. That's in about 90 minutes or so on. It'll never get back. But I sat and watched because I said I don't really understand where Putin and Russia is coming from.
Yeah,
Jude. It is like anybody after watching that comes back and says Putin's got a point. Go take a run to yourself. Jude, it's
I'm going to say it in a minute.
No, Jude, he doesn't. The dishonesty was there. Basically, he said the West is to blame for everything. Russia is innocent victim. He didn't invade a sovereign state with 44 million people that voted for it. He hasn't threatened nuclear. He didn't bring it up. He did. He said that basically they're trying to unite Russian-speaking people. He basically said part of Poland should also be part of Russia. God help the Poles. He didn't mention how many Russians have been killed. He didn't mention the usage of suicide drones to attack buildings and Ukrainian infrastructure. And it was just delusional stuff all the way along. That he didn't mention how many deaths of Russian soldiers. And he didn't mention. He had no regrets. Everything. Russia is winning. Everybody else is wrong, and we're right.
But Pat, this is war, and we know that the first casualty is truth. What you've just described, I find it very hard to argue with any of that. That's pretty much what he said, I gather. But what does the West say? The West says it's all Putin's fault. We didn't do anything. He's simply attacking a sovereign nation. Why he would do that? He must be a madman, etc. We hear tales of the number of Russian dead or Russian forces, tanks that were captured, the advance of the Ukrainian army pushing the Russians back. We don't hear accounts of the number of Ukrainians that have been killed. In other words, they're selective with the facts that they give it. And that's keep that in mind, Pat. You have to keep that in mind whenever you have.
No, but Jude, I didn't say the West were innocent. Far from it. NATO and all the rest of it, but Jude, like he was chatting about democracy and about there are different kinds of democracy and this liberal democracy that the West was trying to impose. What he's really trying to say is, I have murdered most of my opponents, I've poisoned quite a few of them, and the rest of them are in jail. That I have been in power for 22 years, but we have got a certain kind of democracy. It's the democracy that I decide, and and there's no protests allowed in the streets and so on. Like if he is so popular as a leader, why doesn't he allow opposition? Why doesn't he allow protests in the street? If there's such support for his war, why doesn't he? Why have there been the people being any protesters being battered off the streets, aren't battened off the streets. You know.
Yeah, I accept all that, Pat. That's absolutely true. But I was watching a program you should watch, or a movie on Netflix last night called The Courier,
Uh,
and set at the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis.
yeah,
And there, you see some politicians talking, and they're saying, if he thinks that he's going to be, the very idea that the Russians would try to set up nuclear weapons right on our backyard in Cuba, that's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah,
But think about it. The Ukraine is right beside Russia,
yeah.
and the Ukraine has got nuclear weapons, I'm sure, positioned in there courtesy of the USA.
No, no. Ukraine agreed to give up their nuclear weapons back when they became as part of a buffer between.
Pat, do you believe that the Ukraine doesn't have nuclear weapons at the moment?
But Jude, let's be honest. Who's going to use nuclear weapons?
I know, it's crazy. It's crazy
stuff. But here, Jude, another one. But hold on, Jude. There's one final point I have to make here. 44 million Ukrainians voted. I think 80% of them voted. They don't like Russia. They don't like the way the Russian society lives. They voted west, going to go west. Now, they're not a perfect society, and there's corruption, and there's all the rest of it. But their way of living, their standard of living, was way above what was available in Russia, and they were starting to grow. And I think the whole lot of this is Russia doesn't like the fact that they were moving away from their sphere of interest.
Well, that's true. They are, and the West have encouraged them no end in terms of membership of the EU and membership of NATO and so on. All I'm saying is I agree completely. Putin's a bad man, but keep in mind that there are things that they're not emphasizing, which if it had been the Americans were faced with a similar situation, they would have been screaming bloody murder.
By the way, George W. Bush pulled out of that nuclear thing way back I think, in 2002, which but the Russians wanted to stay in.
Yeah.
So there's where you start. NATO started to build around nearly Russia. There's no doubt about that. But that should have been negotiated, and
of course it should.
But for Putin to suggest, sat there like an altar boy yesterday, and I know Martin McGuinness wants to.
The altar boy.
Some altar boy, like he's an assassin, basically.
Yeah.
But anyway, this sort of thing is, you need to know what people, not just what they say, what they don't say. And Putin left out so much yesterday.
True enough. I see, incidentally, and this is a related topic, that I'm sure you've seen it too over the last day or two, that the Irish people, the people in the south, that is, support the Ukraine, but they believe there are too many refugees coming. Translate that into the bloody Ukrainians come taking our jobs, taking our houses, taking our women. Do you see a contradiction there to say, we support Ukraine, and then we don't want to see so many of them coming in here? There'll be a threat to our jobs, a threat to our whole community, our way of life, etc.
Can I tell you something? Let me give you a wee anecdote here. Yesterday, myself and my dear missus went for a drive, and we ended up in this wee village of Glenties. Is
that your missus that you got into hot water for saying what her age was?
It was. Shut up. We'll not mention that. She's 66. Shut up. But myself and her went for a drive yesterday, and we ended up in Glenties. And there's a wee bookshop, second-hand bookshop, come sort of charity shop there. And I always get them because there's some great books. There's somebody up there who's a very good reader. Anyway, I went in there, and me and Mrs. went in there, and it's about this half the size of this room, and in other words, it's just like a wee small living room. And there was myself and the Mrs., and there was about 6, 7 other people. The 6, 7 other people were all Ukrainians, every single one of them in that place. Now this is Glenties. And about a month ago, we went around, I can't remember the name of the place, a wee village in the middle of nowhere. And I could hear people talking. They were Ukrainians. Jude, there are serious amount of Ukrainians living in Donegal. I mean, serious.
But Pat,
lovely people.
Should that not be a source of pride rather than a source of regret?
But let me finish. By the way, when they came out of I was sitting waiting on the car then because Rosie was looking at something else.
Yeah.
And I noticed they came down, and there were a couple of lovely kids and big smiles and waved. They're beautiful kids. And they came out, but they went into Highlands Hotel. So I presume Highlands Hotel is now out of bounds for tourism and all the rest of it. I presume that the Ukrainians are living there. But Jude, you see what's starting to happen. So there was some talk that we could deal with 200,000 refugees. I would love to know where that came from, Jude. If it was a government source, somebody should get shot, because, Jude, we were having trouble dealing with our own housing place in Donegal. There's a mega problem. The homeless levels in Dublin were off the scale, and the direct provision stuff is a disaster and a disgrace to us as a nation. So how the hell we were going to find accommodation for 200,000 Ukrainians? Well, Jude, I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, good point, Pat. Good point. They should have been let know, and the Irish people should have been let know before they came in. This is the conditions you're going to have to live in. And there's going to be, as you say, in Glenties or wherever, there's going to be this number of Ukrainians.
But another point. Imagine a wee village in the middle of nowhere. And I love Glenties. This is not an insult to Glenties. Dude, you have to go over mountains to get there.
Yeah.
And away in the remotest part of Donegal. Yeah. If you're Ukrainian, what do you do there? Sorry, Jude, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I just think that if they had, I'm not saying that because you regulate or you only invite the people you actually can then, so to speak, entertain or accommodate. That's essentially what I'm saying. Not that you should close the door to them in any way or limit numbers because you don't like Ukrainians too much. If you're supporting Ukraine, how else are you going to support them other than accepting them, the refugees, as much as you can in a sensible, planned way? But this is the thing, you see. Mayhold Martin, as I remember, was the one who used this phrase, 200,000. I mean, they clearly can't deal with the numbers that they have at present.
Not a hope, Jude.
And
not
especially since there's this housing crisis is going on.
Yeah.
Only 2 minutes left. Have we time, Pat, to talk very briefly about Prince Harry's spare? Will you be
you know more about this. And I know I've heard the old joke about the heir and the spare, but you could tell me what this is about.
Well, he has written a book, and it's coming out in January, and it's going to be translated into 17 languages. And it's going to be simultaneously in Australia, America, UK, all over the place. And it's called Spare, meaning that, he's the backup, he's the backup for William. And he's supposed to be going to take the lid off all the things that have happened and the way him and his wife were rejected and the racism they showed towards her and so on. What do you think? Do you have sympathy for Prince Harry?
I do actually, because apparently, I would know anyway, but I've read quite a lot that when he was in the army, he was actually popular, that the guys liked him, that he didn't put on any airs and graces, that he was actually a very decent sort of guy and so on. And his mother was a very, as far as I can see, a pretty decent woman. And by the way, there's a quick version. I know we're only her, Diana's brother, there was a program about, wanted to see who would react to somebody sitting in poverty. He came out of a building one day in London and there was somebody sitting in poverty and went over and to try and help them. So there's a decency in that family.
Just as a sort of a little coda to this, because we really are out of time now. That speech that Diana's brother gave
at the obsequies, yes.
Somebody told me the other day that speech is one of the speeches that is on the curriculum for I think 4th years or 5th years in the north here. Yeah. I think that's rather wonderful actually, because it was one hell of a speech. It's just looking at it, not in terms of what he said, I suppose in terms of what he said, how he said it. It really was a real bounce.
But Jude, I take it Harry won't be coming back into the royal family once he publishes this book. Yeah.
Not until he can get the gun away from William. Okay,
Pat.
Thank you very much.
Good luck. Good luck.